Now on the count of 3, I want you to look down at that subscribe button, and if you haven't clicked it, I implore you to do so, not only for my own sake, but yours, for where else will you be delivered such satisfying content? 1, 2, 3. I'm so sorry, all of that will make sense in due time, but the first half of this video will indeed be spoiler-free. I'll get into everything that I possibly can without spoilers first, so the background info, technical notes I had, things like that. Then I'm gonna do a character breakdown, and that will have light spoilers in it, because there were some huge stars in this movie, and I do want to include a lot of insight from the cast and crew. After that, I'm gonna do a plot breakdown, but it's not gonna be super thorough because this movie is still exclusively in theaters. Let's get started, babes. This movie was written by 2 men, Will Tracy and Seth Reese. They produced the movie as well, and this whole thing was based on a real-life experience that Will Tracy had. He's been to several restaurants that influenced his writing on this movie. There was one that he went to in Chicago, and this is a great conversation between him and Seth Reese, so I'll link this article down below. But the first restaurant that ever inspired this script has a name that I could only dream of pronouncing. It's located in Norway. The pictures of this place are unbelievable, and I can completely see how this was the inspiration for the movie. Anyway, Will had met Mark Mylod on the show Succession. He directed this film, and here's why.
I couldn't believe how such extraordinary things could be happening, and yet I believed every moment of it on the page. That was what was so intoxicating about it. It didn't feel heightened. It felt like I could really believe that these things could happen.
Originally, he was not slated to direct, but rather Alexander Payne was as of 2019. Also as of 2019, Ralph Fiennes was set to star alongside Emma Stone. If you've seen the film, you can only imagine how different it would be if it was Emma Stone rather than Anya Taylor-Joy. Sidebar, I guess I've been saying her name wrong for a really long time. It's Anya. Emma Stone just would have brought a completely different energy to this role, so I feel like they can thank their lucky stars that she ended up having a scheduling conflict. The reason why Ralph has been cast since the beginning is because he's always who they had in mind when writing the script.
Both myself and Will and Seth, the writers, we had him in our heads, right from the start, literally from writing the script, and certainly once I came aboard and the work I was doing with them. And my first meeting, well, Zoom meeting with Ralph just backed that up, really. We had one of those lovely, oh, I see him that way as well.
It's funny because I feel like that kind of goes against the mantra of a lot of writer-directors. A lot of people will say never do that, never write with a specific actor in mind for a plethora of reasons. One, no matter what you write and see in your head, it's never going to be exactly that when it comes out on film. So you can imagine an actor being great in the role that you're writing, but then when it comes time for them to read it, they could do something completely outside of the realm of what you were thinking. And the second biggest reason, I think, is because you're kind of setting yourself up for heartbreak. You'll never know if you'll be able to get the actor that you were hoping for, and generally the chances are pretty slim unless you're at the very top of this industry. So good for them for getting Ralph, because I think it would be hard to imagine someone doing this role better. The entire cast seemed to have a really great dynamic with one another, and thank God for that, because this was one of the most unique on-set experiences that most of them had ever had. According to Mark and the cast, this felt much more like a theater production than a film. Because the camera movements were so dynamic, and because this was a mostly one-location film, the actors were on camera much more often than usual. Generally, when you're switching coverage and such, the other actors can then take a break. And typically when you have a restaurant scene in a movie or a show, all the background people, they're extras. They're not actually characters themselves. But due to the nature of the fact that everybody in this restaurant is a very strong character, they didn't have that luxury. So here's some insight from the cast and director on that.
The trickiness of shooting chronologically is one is able to do that because so much of the film is set in the one space, a space that we built and created. Of course, there's inherent cinematic challenges to making sure that's a dynamic cinematic space and not just something that feels claustrophobic in the wrong way and becomes tiresome. For that, I enlisted, first of all, looking at the work of Bong Ho in Parasite, which weaponizes the architecture so brilliantly and keeps that space so dynamic.
We were all aware of the fact that Mark wanted us all mic'd, all on set, all the time, and that he was shooting 360. So he's like, listen, you better be performing because the camera might be on you. I had never worked like that. I don't think you had either.
It's humbling. Because you're the center of attention, and all of a sudden you're back to being background.
But it actually feels a lot like being on stage. Like if someone's looking over at you, you better be doing something interesting, or you better be like engaged.
So not only was everyone having to be turned on in character for 12 hours a day, but there was a lot of improv as well. Anya also made the choice to be seated with her back to the chef character and suffered a lot of neck and back pain from constantly being twisted around to look at him, though she still stands by that choice. She just felt that it was a good indicator of their relationship dynamic. So that was was one suggestion of hers that made it into the film, and we will talk about another one later. But on that note, it was an extremely collaborative effort between Mylod and the actors, and the communication seemed to be really good between everyone. Another fun fact, this movie was shot sequentially, which if you're out of the loop, that's almost never done. So the cast and crew were constantly having talks about what level of tension should we be at now, what kind of atmosphere are we playing up. And this was seemingly a very positive experience for everyone despite the challenges.
I don't think I've ever been part of such a collaborative and supportive cast and crew. Everyone was just enjoying each other and really rooting for them to do the best possible job they could do. And that is, you know, I think down to Mark and the atmosphere that he creates.
You do create a wonderful atmosphere, a company atmosphere, so everyone feels they're a team. That was made it a very happy shoot.
That's the dream, when a set feels extremely symbiotic and everybody is listened to and taken care of. A lot of sets are rightfully kind of like, keep your mouth shut until you're spoken to. There's not a lot of time for conversation. That works for a lot of things. I appreciate when I'm running a set when people only chime in when it's absolutely necessary because I'm kind of a creative tornado. On Somnum, I was mainly talking with my producers about what we were doing in that moment, how things are gonna look in the edit, are we on track? And with my actors about what they were doing, but was focusing on a million things at once. So I had a great crew because they mostly just chimed in when they had a good constructive idea or if they noticed continuity was off. It was great. I think if I were directing a set like this where I didn't write the material and I had these world-class actors with me, I would want that to be as collaborative as possible.
The casting director and I worked so hard to get these actors who were so intelligent, who could just roll with the characters. We do takes of whole improvisation and they could just be in the moment the whole time, and they were just so open to that approach. It was really fun to play.
I also just love when everybody speaks really highly of each other after the fact. I feel like that's kind of been a pattern with the best movies I reviewed this year. Similar sentiments were made about Barbarian and Crimes of the Future. Oddly, the same can go for Halloween Ends, and so I wonder if this dynamic can sometimes have adverse effects if you just kind of are surrounded by yes men. Nonetheless, it worked out very well for The Menu, and if you couldn't tell, this is one of my new favorite releases of the year. I believe if you go back and you watch my video that was my most anticipated horror movies of 2022, I think that I referenced Halloween Ends, Nope, and The Menu as being my top 3 most anticipated of the year. And I was 0 for 3 before The Menu, and so finally this movie ended up fulfilling my expectations. It goes without saying, the acting in this movie is incredible. It stars 3 of my favorite actors of all time. Ralph Fiennes, of course, Lord Voldemort, he's one of my faves. We got Nicholas Hoult, and I love him especially from Warm Bodies. He was one of my first crushes. And in all fairness, he looks like this at the end of the film. Okay. And the woman that I would follow into the deepest pits of hell, Anya Taylor-Joy.
I'm so sorry, I feel vaguely creepy only because I'm really bear with me.
On and off screen, she seems great, right? Anyway, so of course they all delivered, and I'll get more into their characters later. The direction was also fantastic. I never felt bored in the location, even though they're in the restaurant for probably a solid hour and a half of the movie. It's kept completely dynamic because of the characters, I think. The best movies focus on character, that's my belief anyway, because I feel like that gives you something really grounded to latch onto in the film. Plus, this movie had a slow and effective build to the mayhem, which it's not a spoiler, it's a horror movie after all. I think you also know that you have a script that really means something when the actors are not afraid to give it their all.
I've said this like multiple times today, just like tip my hat to this fellow right here, because I didn't actually have to eat that much, and Nick attacked every take with so much gusto and fervor, and you nailed it.
I ate quite a lot of oil. That was what I had in my little spoon right there. I was just licking oil throughout the day.
How did it taste?
Oily.
I cannot imagine shoveling food into my body for 12 hours a day, multiple days a week. The generosity of spirit is so palpable from this film. Ralph and Anya especially have a really strong chemistry, and like I said, she was insistent upon twisting her spine every day. On top of that, these actors really only got to have a break when they would be doing extreme close-ups on the other actors, but they would still stay to watch.
It was only in extreme close-ups that we all got to, none of us really left set. We just stop and turn around and watch a great performance, and you get a front row seat.
There are a lot of shots when we're looking out at the consumers and Chef can't be seen. But according to the cast, Ralph would still stay on set and kind of set the tone and the energy for the rest of the actors. If you've seen the movie, you know his character absolutely dictates the energy of everybody else. That's part of how you know this movie definitely transcends genre. First and foremost, it is a dark comedy, but there's a lot of drama between the characters as well, and it's this really timely, anti-rich, anti-elitist piece as well. well. It's also exploring the pursuit of perfection and kind of had a Black Swan vibe to it too, but I'll get more into the themes in the spoiler section of the video. Really quickly before I get into the character breakdown though, I do want to give my final spoiler-free recommendation. Go see this movie. Absolutely, absolutely, just do it. The slight art house vibes might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I feel like it walks the line of having that artistic edge while still being really entertaining and kind of a good popcorn flick. There's really never a dull moment, at least in my opinion. I feel like it always keeps moving. It's so entertaining. Just go see it. Now, my character breakdown will not include any spoilers of the actual plot, but there are little things about the characters that are revealed as the movie goes along. So if you want to click off, that's totally understandable, but this section will mostly be about the cast and crew insight on the characters. I'll start with a few of the side characters, my favorites being Felicity and the unnamed movie star. They're played by Amy Carrero and John Leguizamo. The rest of the crew noted that they were the best improvisers on set and they seemed to really enjoy working with one another.
You two were kind of like the improv MVPs. So
yeah,
baby. Even being that good.
She played his assistant and he plays this washed up movie star, and he wouldn't name who, but he did draw a lot of outside inspiration for this role.
I had to know a name, I had to have a backstory. For Amy and I to be able to improvise, we talked a lot about our backstory. We did all that method stuff. We got to know who we are. Otherwise, we just like generic people, and hopefully that's not what we did. But I've been in a lot of action movies with action stars that became washed up, so I had a lot of people in mind when I created the character.
He was one of my favorite stereotypes that they tackled because I have met quite a few washed up actors in my time in the Hollywood sphere. I've also just met a lot of people in general who perpetuate an image of themselves that is so out of line with who they actually are. So his character hit close to home because I especially identified with his assistant. She was so far above his antics and way too smart to be tied to him, but just due to the nature of the industry, of course, she was stuck as his assistant. They also purposefully perpetuated all the different stereotypes that you would typically see in a restaurant like this. There was the old couple, the regulars that only ate there because they could afford it. There were the critics who were hilarious, Miss Thalassic over here. There were the playboy asshole types who had obviously just come into new money, so they had no manners, just entitlement. Then you had Tyler, who was seemingly this really annoying trust fund brat who was also a major foodie. Nicholas Hoult was so fun to hate in this role. He was fantastic. A lot of the actors came up with backstories for their characters, and a tidbit that he shared is that he thinks that Tyler had abusive parents. In his mind, Tyler was punished with food, whether it be them withholding food from him or forcing him to finish everything on his plate. He didn't really specify on that, so I'm just taking a guess there.
The tragic elements of him are this desperation to be accepted and how uncomfortable he is in his skin and just to kind of feel wanted, I suppose. And then there's this real pretentious kind of know-it-all mansplaining side of him that's kind of horrific as well.
I definitely read that from his character because he was obviously very annoyingly passionate about food, but the way that he would speak to Margot and crave the approval of Chef little baby boy energy. He and Chef were both the perfect opposites to Margot, but in their own ways, and I'll get into that soon. Next, I want to talk about the lovely Hong Chow as Elsa, the maitre d'. Fun fact, Elsa was written as a tall Scandinavian woman, but thank God they found Hong Chow because she crushed it. Her inspiration for the role is also pretty unexpected.
I happened to be in Portland, Oregon at the time filming another movie, and I just drew inspiration from everybody that I saw, all the funky people in Portland, Oregon.
I thought that was funny because I don't really get it, but whatever works. She has a great dynamic with Chef, which is something that was translated from real life. She respects Rafe as an actor tremendously, and so it was really easy for her to fall into her role because they had a similar dynamic, the characters. I'm saving him for the end though, because now I'm moving on to my favorite dynamic of the entire movie, Margot and Chef Slowick. In the movie, his character is extremely intimidating and she's kind of a no-nonsense, boundary-setting woman. So pairing them together is awesome. They have the best scenes because you can clearly tell there's some sort of unspoken kinship there. It was apparently their favorite work as well.
We found those scenes very comforting and quite warm. Like every time we were in it, we were always really enjoying it, and I think it's because at the end of the day, Margot and Chef Slowick recognize something in each other, and it's not an easy intimacy to pin down.
She's a beautifully natural actress, and there are just sometimes when you feel the truthfulness of the person you're acting with. Just really helps you, it raises your game somehow, and she's got that.
The central conversation had to be this conflict stroke connection between this character, Margot, this force of light, and this character who sees nothing but darkness, because I knew that actually you up against Rafe would be absolutely fascinating, would feel like a really equal, combative, and yet had this underlying warmth and connection because of that shared empathy that both of you have. You can both see.
Now I would like this movie, but in the form of a rom-com where two intellectual equals find each other like that. Just imagining this movie turning into a rom-com, Jesus Christ. Also, I know I've been letting the interviews just play a lot, but this is a rare occasion where I don't have too much to build off of it because they state things so well themselves. This is why I love reviewing movies that are made by really smart people, because I'm like, yeah, go off, let me keep my mouth shut. Anyway, almost everyone in this cast were speaking really highly about their scene partners and how they helped them up their own game. Imagine the symbiosis. They really had a dream team going on. But Margot plays the relatable straight man. She is basically the audience. So not too much to note with her other than she's really likable, and thank God she's played by Anya. The character that I found far more interesting than anybody else in this film was Chef, because he is the vessel through which most of the commentary is explored.
He's a man from quite a humble background who's sort of made himself into something else. He's had a gift for cooking, an instinct for food. I think from as a young boy, he's loved preparing food, loved the ritual of making food and sharing it. His talent has got him to this place of fame and wealth and renown. And he said it's like power and influence can corrupt people, and somehow it's twisted his own sense of himself. And at some deep level, he knows it. The lost soul, really, that's what he is to me. He's a lost soul. I mean, you want to get something right, and every night as an actor on stage, you want to hit the button. And I guess it's the same. Chefs are in a sense performing. There's an element of theatre to the grand restaurants, but they're dealing with fine degrees of accuracy in the preparation of things.
I'll talk about all that perfectionism stuff later on after I finish the plot breakdown. We'll sort of have a theme breakdown once we're through it all. But I loved Chef so goddamn much. There are so many layers to him. First, you think he's just this asshole elitist chef because that's what the atmosphere of the restaurant would want you to think. Then you peel back a layer and what he's actually resentful of this, because now that he's achieved this, where does life go from here? Then another layer, and you realize that he did once have a strong passion for cooking and feeding people, but where has that gone? Then another layer, and you realize he's essentially just like Margot, service workers at their core, which is just a construct. It's not actually part of who you are. It just kind of represents the class struggle they were commenting on in this movie. Hope I'm making myself clear about that. But I'm starting to get ahead of myself. That does it for all the characters, so why don't we get into the plot breakdown? I would give a spoiler warning here, but I feel like the people that wanted this movie to remain a mystery have been long gone by now. So the movie opens on Margot and Tyler bickering, and they're about to get on the boat, and you're thinking, oh yeah, they've probably been a long-term couple. They bicker about her smoking, and I love that you can watch that scene from an entirely new lens the second time around. Then we're introduced to all the characters, and I've been over that, so I'm not gonna rehash it, but I will say, in the beginning, I wasn't sure that I was gonna like this movie. Going into it, I had no idea that it was a satire, and those are really hit or miss for me, because often satires are not ha-ha funny, so they need to be making accurate commentary on the human experience for it to be effective at all. And at first, as I was getting into this world, I was like, oh, they didn't write a single likable character. Okay. I was thinking, I don't want to spend an hour and 45 minutes with these miserable people. But as the tension gets ratcheted up, so too does the humor, and it becomes abundantly clear that the movie wants you to be laughing at these characters. So they make it to the restaurant, and they waste no time making it clear that all of the sous chefs have this cult-like mentality following Chef Slowick. They all sleep in the same room for something crazy like 3 hours a night, just no regard for their own sense of self, but only to their passion for following this man.
You had them do training. It was all choreographed faultlessly.
Yeah, we had this 1-week boot camp with, Lauren Candelo, our second AD, and John Ben Hayes, our local brilliant chef from Savannah. Literally everything they're doing is completely correct for whatever course is being prepared.
So in real life, these cooks were going through hell to maintain accuracy in the film, which I think paid off. My immersion in this world was unreal. If you go through the main points on the bite model of authoritarian control, it's really interesting which tidbits they chose to exhibit, because generally cults have really charismatic leaders, and Slowick was not that. His intimidating form still is a front, so it is almost the opposite of what you would generally see, where a cult leader is really charismatic, but then when the walls come down, they're really scary. movie. That was a fun flip on that, I thought. So then they're in the restaurant and they start being served this gorgeous food, and that was all extremely intentional as well. World famous chef Dominique Crenn was brought on to create these dishes, and David Gelb from Chef's Table was brought in to recreate the filming style from that docuseries.
Your eyes are on everything.
Everything.
I saw the Chef's Table about Dominique Crenn, was completely taken with her and her whole vibe and spirit, and then Mark said, oh, she's going to design the food. So I was very excited about that.
This is a part of making sure that everyone is on the same page. It was important to also get a sense of who he was as a chef, so his food tell a story of who he is.
Again, can't stress enough how deeply immersed I was in this film. Thank you guys, thank you, everybody who worked on this movie. I think it's also just so cool that Crenn made sure to spend a lot of time with Rafe so that she could understand the character and better understand which dishes she should make. Lots of tangents, let me get back on track. Basically, things are tense in the restaurant, but nothing too crazy has happened. We see the threads start to unravel a bit between Margot and Tyler when he speaks to her in the most demeaning way. He's like, just shut up and eat your food. She stood up for herself, demanding an apology, and I'm sure that at that point, everyone in the crowd was empathizing with her, which I'm really glad for, because another thing that this movie was doing, maybe inadvertently, was humanizing sex work. Typically, when sex workers show up in films, they're much more like ornaments. They're not even really real people, let alone the main character. But that reveal doesn't come until later, so anyway, the next big plot moment is when one of the sous chefs ends his own life in front of everybody. There was tension and stuff before that, but I was starting to wonder if I was even sitting in a horror movie before that happened. That was a switch, and then things were never the same. But you were still left on your toes because while some of the characters are freaking out, others are like, oh no, it's just theater, that's just part of it. And I was feeling that exact same way. In my mind, I was thinking, oh my god, it could go either way. I love when you as an audience member can be feeling exactly what the characters are. Again, immersion, bitch, learn about it.
We're such ritualistic creatures, and that was something that you talked about a lot at the very beginning, where it's like, we do not switch tables. Even when we leave, when something shocking happens, we stay in our position because that's our only grasp of familiarity, or it makes us feel safe.
There were so many psychological studies on that, where when things become threatening in this restaurant, there's so many studies backing it up that given the choice of, can you believe that something is really bad could be happening here, or do you just want to pretend it's all a show? Every 9 out of 10 people will just go, it's a show, and choose to believe that as a, rather than faced up to an uncomfortable truth.
Funny that, how humans are such creatures of habit and what we grasp onto as safety. I just feel like every facet of this movie was so well thought out. The characters, the food, the psychology. I'm gushing. The menu is making me gush. Anyway, then the old man gets a finger cut off, and then it becomes much more real for the guests at that point. Then Slowik makes it known through this monologue that he has lost his passion for his craft because of his horrible customers. He makes the announcement that everyone will be dying this evening except for Margot, who he has an aside with, and he gives her a choice. You can die with them or you can die with us. In another aside, we also find out that Slowik has personally invited Tyler, who knew that they were all gonna die that night, and his date couldn't make it, and that's why he hired Margot for the evening, knowing she would die. And she slaps the shit out of him. This was another addition to the film thanks to Anya, and I just want to throw it some love because, just listen.
I have a thing about feminine rage, which people think, for some reason, and this is with no disrespect to any writer, I get a lot of men doing really terrible things and women sitting silently whilst one tear slowly falls. And I'm like, oh no, we get mad and angry. And I remembered pulling Mark aside and saying, I'm really sorry, but the only way to play this truthfully is for me to attack him. And he was like, oh, you mean like this? And I was like, no, I'm gonna
have at him.
Yeah, fucking same. I wouldn't have been able to state it much better than that. I would have slapped his soul from his body for doing that. Actually, I'm more of a kicker. I would kick him in the head. Years ago, I did kickboxing training, so it would probably go a little something like this. That was dumb. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Then Tyler kind of gets what's coming to him when Chef humiliates him. He makes him cook some bullshit in front of the entire staff. A lot of know-it-alls who spend all their time trying to prove to you how much they know are actually some of the biggest idiots. So thank you, the menu, for that demonstration. Nicholas Hoult also said that in that scene, Rafe would whisper something different into his ear each time. I wish that he had given an example, but I guess that Rafe was improvising different ways to make Tyler cry, and ultimately ultimately end his own life, so I can only imagine. Slowik then decides that Margot, well actually her name is Erin, I'm gonna call her Erin from now on. He decides that she is one of them, so he sends her out to go get a barrel. This is where it gets weird because she breaks into Slowik's cabin, which is an exact replica of Hawthorne, the restaurant. I don't know how far this was meant to be left to interpretation because I couldn't quite figure it out. My best guess is that he is so far down the rabbit hole of being a perfectionist in his craft. Like, he's so devoted that even his house is a replica of his workstation. Let me know your interpretation of that down below because I must move on to what happens next. Elsa comes in and she finds Erin in the replica house and they get into a brawl and I loved it. Ooh, the choreography of this scene. And Erin kills her dead. This was a moment of some of the most excitement for me and almost felt like it could have been the climax of the film because her final confrontation with Slowik, oh my god, a fly just landed on my head. Get the fuck out of here. Oh no. Ugh. Because the final confrontation with Chef is so mellow, so I feel like that's why she had to get into a brawl with Elsa. Oh my god, not a hiccup. No. Falling apart. Anyway, she discovers a picture of young Chef flipping burgers and looking genuinely happy, and this is kind of a light bulb moment for her, but we don't quite know why yet. She also discovers a radio, and she radios in some help from the Coast Guard. Or so we thought. This was one of my favorite twists of the entire movie because I genuinely thought that he was gonna help them. I did not smell the subterfuge, much like the characters in the restaurant. My logic was like, well, he didn't come with a team, he's alone, so realistically, even though he has a gun, the rest of the chefs could easily take him out. So I was expecting more of a showdown, especially because they upped the violence with the brawl between Elsa and Erin. I thought it was a great twist and an incredible design of Slowik's that they had crafted the night so meticulously that even if a customer escaped, they had some dude on a boat who was in on it too. And what happened to him? Oh, he was one of the line cooks. So then he took off that outfit and just got back into the kitchen. That's wild. I wonder if you go back and rewatch the movie if he was there all along and if that's a commentary on how we don't really see the service workers that work for us. I do wonder, babes, have I just cracked the case? I'll have to let you know when I rewatch it. Now, when I tell you the guests were upset, downtrodden after this, again, I'll take it back to something that I mentioned earlier.
We calibrated as a group. It was such a, as Rafe says, it was such a company because we were virtually all on set all the time, all together. There would just be conversations between every take as do we need to take it there? Do we need to explore this? So we can all feel it together. We can feel the group dynamic of that. And so you can feel the calibration. If we go too hot, we know that we need to pull back because we still need to get to that place.
Yeah.
So we just felt it out together.
I think for this movie especially, for any one location horror, it can be nothing but beneficial to shoot it sequentially. The actors can keep track of their performance so much easier, and with this movie that has such a delicate rise in tension, it was perfect for that. Making sure everyone is on the same page is so important for fostering the right atmosphere. Most of the time you're not working with an ensemble like this, so you don't have to be super picky with the background actors because there's no focus on them anyway. I just can't get over it. I can't stop talking about it because I feel like it's so well done. Like, this film is absolutely a testament to the talent of all these people. But after that stunt, Slowik now considers Erin to have betrayed them, and so he says, you know what, you can die with the customers now. Until... oh yeah. Erin calls him out and she's like, I don't like your food. I'm still fucking hungry and I want a goddamn cheeseburger. None of this fancy, ridiculous shit. Just give me grease and crinkle cut fries. And he's taken aback. He's humbled. He's been requested to make real food. This was such a simple yet profound thing because of where he ended up in his life.
That pursuit of excellence at this place is very real. And any artist who wants to be great eventually at some point has to just go down the rabbit hole and focus on this thing entirely. And so we are seeing this artist and all of his people who look up to him, we're seeing them almost at the end of the rabbit hole.
So in a way, there's nowhere else to go with a restaurant like that. Once you reach that level of exclusivity and also that level of acclaim, it's not like there's another level beyond that. All you can do is maintain consistency.
This is true of pretty much any profession. More so in creative professions like cooking and what have you, but it's a pretty universal experience. A lot of creative people, myself included, experience burnout. You guys probably notice I do go through periods where I'm uploading a lot more consistently because I feel passionate about whatever I'm working on, or I just somehow find more motivation. Aaron served to remind Chef why he started cooking in the first place, something he lost long ago. She was able to give him a bit of joy before he very beautifully killed himself and a restaurant full of people. In the restaurant industry especially, the producers kind of spoke about how the only way to maintain that career is through passion. Those restaurants spend so much money sourcing the food that they prepare that most of the time they're kind of barely breaking even. It is not a very lucrative industry. So what happens when the creative well runs dry and you're stuck serving a bunch of out-of-touch assholes that don't even care about what they're eating? It was a perfect commentary in my opinion, and it was very cathartic to be able to watch Erin walk out while everyone else kind of got what was coming to them, and she got to enjoy her perfect little burger and watch the whole system burn. And the working class shall inherit the earth. A lot of movies coming out lately with that exact same sentiment, but I feel like this is one that actually did it in a super unique way, especially in the way that they were targeting a very specific industry. The producers also said that they're already starting to develop what I would consider to be a spiritual sequel to this, where they are targeting another industry. I, for one, would love to see them do it for something like dressage. People who prance around on their $10,000 pet to see who can jump over a stick the best. I'm allowed to talk shit about that because I did train riding horses for 3 years, and then I discovered that I don't actually like horses. That's the best idea that I could come up with. Let me know what rich people thing you would like to see mocked down below. It's just always so exciting when you find new people whose careers that you want to follow, and the menu did that for me with these writers. So Godspeed, all the best to the people that worked on this film, bless them, but that will conclude my video essay for today. If you'd like even more content from me, then subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. For even more content, yes, you can join my Patreon. Join all these people over here who keep this channel funded. You get 4 to 6 bonus videos every single month over there with my first reactions to new films. If that's not for you, the rest of my social media is also down below, as well as all the links to the interviews that I cited if you want to watch them in full. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Stay hungry, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!
And on that note, food.